I never imagined that my entire world could flip upside down in an instant. At 20 years old, I felt invulnerable. Life looked like a vast stretch of open road where I had the luxury of making mistakes, learning from them, or not, and casually charting a future that felt a million miles away. I had no idea that one cold, rainy evening would change everything, shattering every assumption I'd ever held about my life and what lay beyond. A restless soul. If you had asked me a year ago to describe myself, I would have said I was your typical college student, balancing classes with social life, sleep deprivation, and endless daydreams about what I might do when I grew up. I was prone to procrastination, often turning in assignments at the last minute with the faint hope that my professors would grace me with a decent grade. Despite juggling a part-time job at a local cafe, I somehow found time to go out with friends, binge-watch shows, and invent 1,000 excuses for why I was perpetually running late. I was flawed, sure, but I was also full of an optimism that felt limitless. For me, the future was an open canvas. I knew I had to declare a major soon, but I couldn't settle on one. Journalism, psychology, maybe business? I wasn't sure. In my mind, life stretched out endlessly before me, and I couldn't imagine a scenario where I wouldn't have enough time to figure it all out. Adulthood seemed half a breath away, real responsibilities on the distant horizon, like a slow-moving storm that I assumed wouldn't reach me anytime soon. Gradually, I started noticing how life keeps propelling you forward, even if you stand still. Time moved, whether or not I was prepared. Assignments piled up, extracurriculars demanded attention, and my bank account stubbornly hovered near zero. Yet I remained confident there was more than enough life left for whatever adventure would come next. And then, I died. The stormy road. That night, the skies were low with heavy clouds threatening to pour. There was a half-hearted drizzle that soaked the pavement just enough to make it slippery. I had been at a friend's apartment all day, struggling through a group project in a stuffy living room, scattered with textbooks, half-eaten bowls of instant noodles, and the occasional whiff of stale coffee. We spent hours debating the aesthetics of our presentation slides and who would collect data for which portion, only to end the day feeling no closer to a polished product. We were exhausted, frustrated, and sugar-crashing after devouring leftover candy from a recent holiday. By the time I decided to drive home, it was sneaking past midnight. My eyes burned from staring at a computer screen, and my joints ached from sitting on the floor for too long. I remember thinking, at least I'll get to sleep in tomorrow. My phone was buried at the bottom of my bag, under snacks, stray pens, wrinkled receipts, and I thought about texting my mum that I was on the way. But I resolved to do it at the next stoplight. That message remained unsent. The roads glistened under the flickering streetlights, each reflective stretch a deceptive patch hinting at standing water or black ice. I turned on the radio, letting music fill the loneliness of the late hour. Driving often calmed me, providing a sense of control. Something about pressing the gas pedal, hearing the quiet hum of the car, and watching the lane stripes flash by always soothed my buzzing thoughts. But that comfort lulled me into a false sense of security. I remember the tires hydroplaning, just for a second, when I switched lanes. It jolted me awake, an adrenaline spark that made me grip the steering wheel a bit harder. I thought, be cautious, so I slowed down. At that point, I felt oddly proud of myself for being responsible. I believed that being careful guaranteed nothing bad could happen. But then I encountered that one patch of black ice nobody warns you about, not until it's too late. One moment, I was mentally reviewing the day's events, half listening to a slow love song on the radio, and the next, my entire car whirled into a violent spin. The world outside the windshield became a kaleidoscope of streetlights, darkness, and headlights racing toward me in the opposite lane. The sound was deafening, tires squealing, metal grinding, my own screams rupturing the air. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst outright from my chest. Panic numbed my mind. There wasn't time for coherent thought or last words. When the other car collided with mine, everything went black. Awakening to the impossible. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the crumpled vehicle. There were no shattered windows or twisted metal around me, no shriek of sirens or scramble of paramedics. Instead, I found myself standing upright in a place that defied description, an expanse glowing with a soft light that seemed to have no clear source. Beneath my feet was something akin to glass, smooth and reflective, radiating a faint luminescence whenever I moved. The air around me shimmered, not uncomfortably humid or cold, but thick with an energy I'd never experienced. It felt like walking inside a dream, yet every detail was crisp, tangible, and strangely comforting. Gone were the clothes I'd been wearing, a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. Now, a simple, flowing white garment covered me, lightweight yet solid. My skin showed no bruise or scratch, and the shock of that realization hit me like a punch to the chest. "I'm dead," I whispered, my own voice echoing in the odd emptiness. I couldn't bear to think those words. My mind fought against them, insisting, "No, this cannot be real." But the subsequent moments offered no escape, no alternative explanation. As I turned in circles, scanning the horizon, which was essentially just endless radiance, a sense of both calm and despair battled within me. Far off, I could pick out what looked like other figures. Some meandered, some froze in place, gazes cast in every direction. Their attire spanned centuries. Some wore outfits like mine, while others seemed to belong in a different era altogether. I wanted to run to them, to ask what was happening, but a flicker of fear held me back. This place, for all its beauty, threatened to unravel me with unanswerable questions. Then a voice called out, "A guide in the unknown. Hey!" The word was gentle yet resonant, as if carried by a breeze I couldn't feel. The speaker was a figure standing several paces to my left, someone tall and quietly commanding. Every inch of him radiated assurance, but not arrogance. His expression was kind yet serious, and he gazed at me like he already knew my name, my past, and everything about me. I wanted to demand, "Where am I? What do you want?" But all that emerged was a shaky exhale. He took a step toward me, and I felt no fear, just an intriguing mixture of curiosity and wariness. Up close, he looked like anyone else, a warm countenance, eyes that seemed old, as though they had seen centuries. There was nothing monstrous or angelic, nothing that screamed danger, yet a gravitas emanated from him so strongly that I felt unsteady on my feet. "You have questions," he said quietly, "and in time you'll have answers." I felt a jolt of frustration. "Answers to what?" I blurted out, my voice trembling. "Am I dead? Is this heaven or somewhere else?" He didn't respond directly but smiled in a patient way, like a teacher waiting for a frightened student to calm down. "You're not prepared to understand everything yet," he replied. "But you've been brought here for a purpose." "What purpose?" I pressed. "I never asked for this. I don't even—" But I couldn't finish my protest, because as exasperating as his vague guidance was, some part of me felt magnetically pulled to follow him. If he held even a fraction of the answers, I needed to know more. He gestured for me to walk alongside him, turning toward an unidentifiable point in the distance, beyond which everything shone in a uniform, mesmerizing gold. I hesitated, but curiosity and desperation overcame my caution. Step by step, I moved away from the place where I initially arrived, uncertain if I was heading deeper into my doom or closer to clarity. An unreachable horizon. We progressed across the glassy ground that never scuffed or cracked. There was no wind, no distinct sun, but the radiance wasn't harsh. It illuminated everything softly, absent of shadows. I found myself examining the man's face when he wasn't looking. He wore a tranquil expression, focused on some point well ahead of us. Eventually, I noticed groups of other people scattered around. Nobody seemed to be speaking. A woman wearing clothes clearly from another century locked eyes with me, but no words passed between us. A man in a business suit knelt, his forehead pressed against the ground as if in deep turmoil, or perhaps prayer. "Who are they?" I asked my guide. "They are those who have reached the threshold," he replied. "Some have died as you have, and some stand at a crossroads between life and what lies beyond. Each has a path to walk." I felt a pulse of dread. "What's my path?" "Keep going," he said. "You'll see." We came upon a region where the light grew denser. It felt as if we were wading into a bright mist without moisture. The glassy floor rippled beneath us, shimmering with color. My heart pounded. I wasn't sure if I should rejoice or recoil. Then I saw it. A massive archway rising like a living sculpture from the luminous ground. Approaching the threshold. The arch looked alive, made of swirling energy that pulsed along its edges. It towered above us, its apex vanishing into the glowing firmament. I could sense something beyond it, a presence or a realm so expansive and profound that I felt dizzy just trying to grasp its size. "This is the threshold," my guide informed me, coming to a halt. He motioned for me to get closer, though I was too startled to move at first. The arch emanated a gentle hum that vibrated through my body, like distant thunder. "What's on the other side?" I asked, my throat tight with anxiety. "That depends on who steps through," he said. "Each soul sees and experiences what they're meant to. Not everyone walks the same road." A wave of panic seized me. "Is this a one-way passage? Once I cross, can I come back?" His gaze held both gravity and compassion. "Not all journeys are final," he said softly, "but you must go forward to learn the reason you were brought here." My mind flooded with protests. "I'm too young. I don't want to die. I have my entire life ahead of me." But none of them escaped my lips. Some primal urging in my heart told me to step forward, to see for myself. Slowly, with trembling hands, I walked beneath the curve of the archway. A luminous surge consumed my entire field of vision. For a moment, my senses scrambled. There was only brilliant white light and the resonant hum, growing louder every second. Then, abruptly, the brightness receded. I found myself in an unimaginably vast space, staring at an iridescent surface that resembled a mirror the size of a continent. The mirror of all the surface of this mirror shimmered with infinite detail. It was as if every fragment of history, every tragedy, every love story, every teen heartbreak, every war or peace treaty was playing out across its reflective plane. Scenes overlapped with fluid complexity, melding births and funerals, celebrations and heartbreak. Prophetic glimpses intertwined with the past and present, weaving an endless narrative that left me breathless. I stepped closer, baffled yet entranced. In one section, I saw a glimpse of medieval knights on horseback. In another, modern city, lights flickered and danced. People danced at weddings, children cried in hospital rooms, and across millennia the mirror presented milestones in the human story. My heart hammered in my chest, overwhelmed by the sheer enormity. "What is this?" I whispered, not sure if my guide stood next to me. He appeared by my side, so close that I felt the comforting aura of his presence. "It's the reflection of humanity," he said. "Past, present, and potential futures interwoven together." "Potential futures?" The words snagged my attention, an ominous knot forming in my stomach. "So it can show what hasn't happened yet?" He nodded. "Yes. Through choices and consequences, humanity shapes tomorrow. This mirror reveals what might unfold, both wonderful and terrifying." With a trembling hand, I reached toward the glassy expanse, but an unseen barrier stopped me inches away. The mirror itself swirled, shifting from a collage of everyday moments to cataclysmic images. I witnessed the earth cracking, oceans raging, entire cities collapsing under disaster. Then, just as quickly, hopeful scenes replaced them. Communities rebuilding together, thick forests reclaiming barren land, families reuniting in an era of peace. Watching it was both heartbreaking and uplifting. "How can both outcomes be true?" His voice was calm. "That's the paradox of freedom and choice. Humanity has always been free to nurture or destroy, love or hate, unify or divide. Each path has consequences." A revelation unfolds. The swirling images settled into something more vivid, more judgment-laden. I saw a figure cloaked in resplendent light, someone exuding an authority that dwarfed everything around him. Though there was no thunder or choir, an unshakable awe reverberated through me. This being radiated warmth and compassion, but also solemnity and power. I knew without explanation, I was witnessing Jesus returning in glory. The reflection showcased an indescribable moment. Crowds of people knelt, some in tearful joy, some trembling with fear. Expressions ranged from relief to terror. Those who reached out to this luminous figure seemed enveloped in love and acceptance, while others cowered or fled, unable to withstand the purity of his presence. No sound emerged from the mirror, but I could sense the magnitude of it, the finality, the unalterable boundary between old and new. My chest tightened, and an uncanny hush filled my ears. I swallowed nervously, hearing my pulse pounding. Despite my modern skepticism, I recognized who he was. My youth was dotted with the occasional Sunday service or holiday sermon, but I had never been fervent in those beliefs. Now, confronted with this vision, I recognized its weight, an unstoppable tide of truth breaking every preconception I'd ever clung to. The radiant figure extended a hand, lips moving in silent invitation. I watched souls respond. Some embraced the offer wholeheartedly, while others recoiled, shame etched on their faces. The scene concluded in overwhelming brilliance, washing away the destruction and leaving behind a landscape renewed, as though Earth was being reborn. Vegetation reclaimed scorched ground, oceans cleared, and humanity thrived in a gentle unity I'd never seen. It ended as quickly as it began. I turned to my guide, tears burning in my eyes. Is this guaranteed?" His face was solemn yet kind. "No. It's one possibility, dependent upon the collective choices of humanity. Free will makes for an unpredictable future." The weight of knowledge. My mind felt overburdened with half-formed questions. How could anyone, let alone me, alter such an outcome? Why show someone so ordinary these monumental visions? Because sometimes those who consider themselves small or ambivalent are chosen to carry big truths, he answered gently, as if reading my thoughts. Your doubts and questions prepare you to be a bridge for others. I pressed my hands to my temples, longing for a single, clear directive. But what do I do with all of this? I'm nobody special. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You're special to those who will listen to you. The responsibility isn't to force people's decisions. It's to share what you've experienced and let them find their path. I stared at the mirror of all one final time, memorizing the swirling potential futures. Devastation, redemption, conflict, unity. It felt unbearably large. Yet in that overwhelming scope, hope glimmered. Even the worst scenarios were not the only possibilities. Even the bleakest darkness came with a promise that it didn't have to end that way. Now, he murmured, it's time for you to go back. Crossing back. The moment he spoke, the mirror's images melted into brilliant radiance. A sensation like a firm but gentle push wrapped around me, pulling me away from the threshold. That same golden archway flickered in the corner of my vision, its glow intensifying until I could see nothing else. Inside this luminous cocoon, a warm darkness descended, reminiscent of falling asleep to comforting music. There was no sense of gravity, no sense of direction, simply a weightless drift through layered light and shadow. For an instant, I sensed a presence, maybe the guide, maybe something else, whispering reassurance. Then, reality blinked, the brightness vanished, and my consciousness snapped back like a rubber band. I awoke to the sterile hush of a hospital room, waking in the world. Everything felt bruised and soft around the edges. The first awareness was the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the sting of fluorescent lights overhead, and the distinct aroma of disinfectant. My body felt leaden, and my left arm tingled with an IV drip. My eyelids were so heavy I had to fight to keep them open. Through the blur, I recognized my mother's shape slumped forward, clutching my hand as if holding on for dear life. When she realized I was stirring, she jerked upright, tears flooding her eyes. Her face mirrored utter relief and exhaustion. I tried to speak, but my throat felt scorched. It took a few tries before I croaked, "Mom!" Her tears shot free, and she stood to fetch water and call for a nurse. As I sipped from a straw, the cold liquid soothing my dry mouth, jagged memories of squealing tires, shattered glass, and a car smashing into me flooded my awareness. The conversation with the guide hovered in some intangible region between memory and dream. I must have drifted off again because the next time my eyes opened, my mother was still there, worry notched in every crease on her face. A nurse checked my vitals, updated charts, and told me I'd been in a coma for multiple days. My injuries were severe. Doctors had been uncertain I'd pull through. Blinking heavily, I recalled the mirror of all, the glimpses of Earth's future, and tears welled abruptly. How would I ever explain this to another human being? It felt absurd, as though I'd hallucinated a cosmic secret. Yet, the deep calm I'd experienced in that other place was unmistakable. I could still feel it humming quietly, like an echo in my bones. Recovery and restlessness. My hospital stay stretched into weeks, a hazy timeline of physical therapy, medication adjustments, and unending checkups. Friends visited, awkwardly trying to hide their shock at my fragile form. My extended FA, Miley, showed up, bombarding me with well wishes and get better soon balloons. Doctors seemed amazed by my progress, repeatedly calling it remarkable that I'd survived. Every night, I relived that luminous realm in my dreams. It wasn't always exactly the same, but the overarching sensation of stepping through something larger than myself left me with an undercurrent of urgency. I couldn't dismiss it as mere delirium. I felt too fundamentally changed. My perspective on trivial daily worries, homework deadlines, petty arguments, shifted drastically. If I mentioned the accident and my near-death perspective, some visitors listened politely but soon changed the subject. Most assumed it was painkillers or stress talking. It was easier for them to believe I had some scattered illusions from trauma than to acknowledge anything deeper. Inside, I wrestled with the knowledge that I'd be forever altered, whether people believed me or not. Torn between relief at being alive and the sense of an assignment unfulfilled, I found myself journaling incessantly. Page after page filled with recollections of that heavenly expanse, the mirror, the figure in radiant light, and my guide's elusive yet profound statements. The need to tell. One afternoon, a close friend dropped by with a cup of takeout coffee. As soon as I smelled the invigorating aroma, I felt a pang of gratitude for normalcy. Part of me craved to drown in ordinary conversation about campus gossip, random memes, or our favorite shows, but the friend eventually asked, "What do you remember of the crash?" In halting words, I explained the slick roads, the spin-out, and the terrifying impact. I couldn't hold back, out-tumbled my experiences on the other side, including the strange barrier, the luminous threshold, the mirror revealing both catastrophic and hopeful futures, and the presence I believed to be Jesus returning to a broken world. My friend listened with wide, concerned eyes, and though I sensed an undercurrent of skepticism, they didn't interrupt. "You really saw all that?" they whispered when I finished, voice trembling. I could only nod, tears burning in my own eyes. "So, what do you think it means?" "That the world is on a precipice of its own making," I replied, hearing how dramatic it sounded but meaning every word. "Destruction and renewal both lie ahead. We have more power than we realize to shape which one we get." A silence heavier than lead descended. "How can anyone choose better?" they asked quietly. I didn't have a neat, tidy solution. The guide's words replayed in my thoughts. "You're not meant to force others, only to share." Pensively, my friend hugged me. "I'm glad you're still here," they said. There was love and perplexity in that embrace, and I realized it might be enough just to be honest about what happened, letting the chips fall where they may. Voices from the past. After being discharged from the hospital, I spent weeks recuperating at home. My mother hovered over me, fussing about medication schedules and physical therapy sessions. Well-wishers arrived in a steady trickle, bearing casseroles and sweet pastries, all wanting to see what a miracle looked like. I appreciated their kindness, but each conversation left me further convinced that I needed to do something tangible with the experience. I ventured online, joining forums where individuals discussed near-death experiences, miracle healings, or spiritual awakenings. Many strangers recounted encounters with tunnels of light, angelic figures, or profound senses of love from beyond the veil. While their stories were unique, a few key themes echoed mine: a sense of mission, an urgency to share. Yet the details I carried, the glimpse of Earth's potential end times and the return of Jesus, felt both exhilarating and burdensome. Some communities accepted it wholeheartedly, while others dismissed it as another tall tale. This digital exploration comforted me, though. I wasn't alone in feeling singled out by an otherworldly vision. Slowly, pieces came together in my mind. The magnitude of free will and the necessity of compassion resonated with a bold new clarity. Life had been an endless horizon for me, but now I recognized it as finite and precious. If the mirror had any lesson, it was that our day-to-day choices cascade into bigger patterns. We each contribute to the future. Transformations of the heart. Revisiting campus the next semester, I struggled to adapt. The hustle of student life, the chatter about the latest campus drama, the complaining about trivial inconveniences. It all seemed so distant from the extraordinary experiences I'd lived through. My friends tried to include me, but I often found my mind drifting back to the threshold, to that uncanny peace I'd felt in a place beyond mortal comprehension. Late at night, I'd lie awake, gazing at the ceiling of my dorm, feeling both blessed to be alive and restless for answers. How do you integrate a cosmic wake-up call into the mundane tasks of classes and chores? I began volunteering in community outreach initiatives, working for a food drive, and tutoring underprivileged children. It wasn't that I consciously believed this alone would save the world from ruin, but each small act carried a renewed sense of responsibility. If every kind gesture nudged humanity closer to the renewed earth I'd witnessed, then I was committed to doing my part. In quiet moments, I played music or scribbled big ideas in notebooks. I wrote poems about hope in the face of fear. I drew crude sketches, imagining the threshold arch, trying to capture its living light. Reflecting on Jesus' luminous return made me yearn for a faith that didn't just sit safely within church walls, but poured out into how we treat neighbors. Indeed, the entire planet we're entrusted with. Questions without answers. Yet even with these changes, I wrestled with doubt. My human side wanted certainty, a sign in the sky, an undeniable miracle that would confirm everything. The best I had was the intangible recollection of light and the lingering hum of that place whenever I prayed. Could I have fabricated the entire vision from trauma-induced delirium? Some nights, a cold rationality whispered that near-death bursts of neural activity had played tricks on me. Waking up to family relief and white hospital walls might have easily blurred with illusions of cosmic significance. But in my heart, that intangible memory refused to wane. I remembered the exact warmth of the air in that space, the calming presence of my guide, and the sensory overload of the mirror of all. The clarity felt more real than any dream I had ever experienced. One early morning, during a quiet meditation, I sensed an echo of my guide's voice, calm, unwavering, gently whispering, "You don't have to know all the whys. The simplest truth is enough. Love, share, and be ready to shine light into dark places." A vision too big to contain the moment arrived when I chose to speak publicly. My local community center was hosting a talk about near-death experiences, inviting speakers to share testimonies. I signed up, my heart pounding at the thought of bearing such sacred details to strangers. The day of the event, I arrived early, my stomach in knots. A modest audience gathered. Some looked curious, others skeptical, and a few were simply there to support friends or pass time. When it was my turn, I stepped to the front and began with the mundane facts: the accident, the coma, the precarious medical odds. Then I described waking in a realm of indescribable light, hearing a voice that led me to a mirror showcasing the entire tapestry of human existence. I spoke of the returning figure of Jesus, the swirling possible fates for Earth, and the conviction that love could heal even the gravest wounds. The hush in the room was palpable. My voice trembled, occasionally cracking, but I pressed on. Rather than trying to prove anything, I just told my truth. When I finished, the organizer looked stunned, and about half the room sat wide-eyed. I braced for scoffing or condemnation, but scattered applause broke out, and a few people even approached me afterward, tears in their eyes, thanking me. They admitted my story resonated with something deep inside them, a sense that the world was thirsting for a hope beyond the usual cynicism and conflicts. Ripples in the waterword of that talk circulated. I garnered invitations to small church gatherings, youth groups, and even an online podcast. I was neither a polished speaker nor a theologian, but I had sincerity. Each time, I reiterated that I wasn't there to push dogma. I only wanted people to consider that a grander tapestry existed beyond our immediate squabbles and amusements. Something in that vulnerability sparked genuine reflection, which in turn sparked more invitations. Meanwhile, my personal transformation continued. I spent more time in quiet reflection, less time complaining about minor inconveniences. My prayer life deepened, though not always with a structured religious approach. I often simply sat in silence, imagining that archway, recalling how my guide's presence made me feel secure amid unimaginable mysteries. Over time, my motivation for living changed from chasing fleeting gratification to fostering love in small daily ways. Listening to a friend vent, helping a neighbor carry groceries, writing encouraging notes to random classmates. I couldn't fix the entire world, but I aimed to be a catalyst for change, no matter how minor. Watching news reports about conflicts or international tragedies stung differently now. Instead of feeling powerless, I reminded myself that each person advocates for a kinder future by practicing compassion in their corner of the world. That is how the reflection might shift from catastrophe to renewal. Reminders of the threshold. Certain nights, though, unease gnawed at me. I'd recall the horrifying scenes of Earth rent by chaos, and I'd wonder if our collective negativity was steering us toward that path. Whenever I felt overwhelmed by despair, an inner warmth seemed to remind me of that shimmering, infinite calm. In glimpses, I almost imagined I heard my guide's voice. Fear does not lead to wisdom. Let love be your anchor. Embracing that love, I found comfort in life's unpredictable roads. The accident that nearly claimed me had also opened a door to revelations I couldn't have grasped otherwise. With each passing day, I grew more certain that I had survived for a purpose, not to scare people with doomsday anticipation, but to spark introspection, to deliver a message of empathy, kindness, and active hope. A new beginning. Months later, my physical scars had mostly healed, leaving behind faint lines that I treated like medals of perseverance. Yet my spiritual and emotional scars ran deeper, reminding me how fragile life is. In some ways, returning to a routine was the hardest part. The world seemed unchanged. People still argued about inconsequential matters, future aspirations, or social media controversies. It felt tempting to recede into cynicism, to label experiences of that other side as illusions. But that place had been far more real than any dream. I couldn't forget the enormous possibilities for humanity that the mirror of all had displayed. Every day, each of us stands at our own threshold, choosing which future we move toward through our words and actions. I resumed my studies with a renewed focus. I settled on a path that combined communication and humanitarian work. My dream evolved into using media platforms to highlight stories of unity and compassion, elevating narratives that show us at our best, bridging divides, choosing to stand together for a better tomorrow. It felt like a small pushback against cynicism, a way to keep the vow I made in that luminous expanse, to remember what I'd seen, to share it as far as my voice could carry. A continuing story. Even now, I don't claim to have special favor or a flawless spiritual map. At times, I still wrestle with unanswerable questions. Why was I chosen for this near-death revelation and not someone else? Could it have been a biological phenomenon? Does it matter if it ultimately inspires hope and love? What I do know is the purely human side of it. Life on Earth is fleeting, achingly precious. We have daily opportunities to steer ourselves and our communities toward empathy or neglect. Though we're often bombarded by war, profit-driven exploitation, and social division, there remains a powerful countercurrent in small acts of kindness, compassion, and moral courage, things that can unify us. When I speak publicly now, I emphasize that my story is a single thread in a vast tapestry. Countless other voices share glimpses of wonder, tragedy, or miraculous twists of fate. Each personal testimony is a note in a larger chorus that calls us to awaken. None of us can single-handedly shift the world's trajectory, but collectively, we can sway it toward love. A soul set on hope. In the quieter hours when insomnia strikes, I sometimes replay that final moment in the mirror of all, Jesus extending a gentle hand, the world trembling in both terror and joy, and the renewal that followed. I believe that renewal is possible on both a grand cosmic scale and in the silent chambers of a single human heart. Perhaps the greatest miracle is that each day we can choose again. It's not about perfection. We fall short, we argue, we make mistakes, and we fail repeatedly. Yet sincerity and striving for decency might be the hidden key to forging a better tomorrow. The threshold taught me that every loving gesture, no matter how small, impacts the world's destiny. I'm still that flawed 20-something who used to oversleep and binge-watch silly shows. But now, I also carry a hope that never entirely dims, one gifted to me in a realm between life and death that changed how I see existence. In sharing it, I may not revolutionize humanity overnight, but maybe I contribute a stepping stone for collective transformation. A final reflection. My life no longer feels like an infinite stretch of easy highway. Instead, I see it as a moment-by-moment experience, each choice significant. The image of that threshold is etched into my memory, reminding me that what lies beyond this mortal life is both ethereal and deeply real, more real than I ever expected in my formerly casual understanding of spiritual matters. When people ask, "So what did you learn?" I try to sum it up simply, that life is fragile and not promised, that there's an unseen dimension far vaster and more loving than we might believe, that free will holds unthinkable power, both creative and destructive, and nobody is a mere bystander. That love, genuine empathy, and unity are not just soft virtues, but cornerstones of a future we desperately need. If my story inspires someone to be a little kinder, to forgive someone they thought unforgivable, or to look at the world with renewed wonder, then perhaps these words have served their purpose. I see humanity standing on a precipice as real as the one I glimpsed in that mirror. Despite the darkness, I choose to cling to hope, because I have witnessed even the possibility of a resurrected, harmonious earth. And so my once simple life continues, shaped by an extraordinary second chance. Though I don't have easy answers or unstoppable conviction, I do have an unshakable belief that our everyday actions, woven together, will determine which reflection the world becomes. I stand here, alive and changed, offering this testimony. Before we dismiss talk of spiritual realities, maybe we should listen to the quiet stirrings within our souls that remind us we're part of something infinitely bigger. I can't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, but I've seen enough to know that an even gentler, kinder, and more luminous reality is not just a dream, it's a genuine possibility. And if I could carry even a fragment of that celestial glow back here, then perhaps it might help light the path forward for someone else, just as that mysterious guide lit mine.